Good evening, everybody. Just enjoying a nice fire. Figured I'd take the time to share a little story and a few life lessons I learned from it. So whenever I was out in Needles, California, it was in the Mojave Desert. If you're not familiar with that place, it's extremely beautiful, extremely stunning in its own way, but extremely barren and dangerous too. The house I was staying at the time was like the last row of houses right before you got to just wide open desert, these giant jagged cliffs, sandstone that have been worn down over time. Basically, I was in a bowl, but there was hundreds of miles of four-wheeler trails, hiking trails, just as far as the eye could see. So I rented a four-wheeler from one of my buddies. It was one of those racing four-wheelers that doesn't have reverse or anything. You can only go forward. So one day after work, I took off a little early, got home, super excited to ride it. And I took off into the middle of the desert. And I was riding through these little canyons that the rare times it does rain and flood, it carves these deep canyons, probably 30 feet high. So I'm riding through as fast as I can go, weaving in and out of these canyons. Because you're sitting below the desert floor at that point, you can't see what's ahead. So I'd say I probably got 4 or 5 miles out and come around this little bend, and out of nowhere there's like 3 or 4 of those nice big side-by-sides, the ones with like 6 seats. They got a nice fire like this going, they got coolers. It's a few families, got their kids and dogs around playing. So I kept going, made another couple miles. And I reached this point where I was just sitting out, looking across the landscape. I made it pretty far out there, far enough to where if the four-wheeler gave up on me, it was not going to be a fun walk home, you know? So I hop back on, start heading back to the house. I'm making it through the little canyons, and all of a sudden the four-wheeler starts sputtering on me. I'm giving it more gas, and it's revving the engine real high, and then stalling out, and then revving the engine real high. And I make it right in front of the people that I passed on the way in, and it's done. It just dies on me. And it's not an electric start either. It's one of those ones that you gotta pull the little thing, you know, and kick it down. So I sat there in front of these people with my helmet on, kicking this four-wheeler had to be at least 50 to 100 times. Definitely flooded it, you know. So this little wave of panic comes over me. And I'm like, man, it's not going to be a fun 2-mile walk back in the desert at night. It's also kind of embarrassing because the one spot in the middle of the desert where no other man is, I'm right in front of these people who are just having a grand old time, you know? So this wave of anxiety came over me, like, what am I going to do? And finally, one of the ladies who was sitting next to the fire yelled out to me. She's like, you know what? At all the places in the desert for you to break down, this is a good spot. You might as well just get off the four-wheeler and come say hi. So I took off my helmet, introduced myself to everyone, and these 2 kids ran up. They were checking out the four-wheeler. And what I thought was going to be a horrible experience of walking my four-wheeler home ended up being a coincidental meeting with some super cool people. Got to share in community even in a barren landscape like that. So I finally put the panic aside and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna let the four-wheeler sit for a while. So we were just hanging out. Finally, after 15, 20 minutes, I walked back to the four-wheeler. Open the gas can, there's no gas in it. I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to give it a try, why not? So I flipped the little kickstand thing, how you start it. She fires right up. So I quickly wave bye to everyone, tell them thank you, throw on my helmet, keep pushing, and just made it home before the last fumes of my tank ran dry. What I took from that was, when things go bad, sometimes the best thing you can do is just stop and embrace where you are. Embrace the people that you're with, the surroundings, even if it's not where you exactly want to be. And it also taught me that you never know when you're gonna run into little moments of heaven, little pieces of peace and joy that you were never expecting. Because that day I was expecting some crazy views. And I was expecting the rush of flying through the desert. But I would have never expected that in this little washed out canyon, in the middle of a barren but beautiful landscape, I'd find a little community. And it'd give me a little bit of hope, a little bit of joy. Seeing those kids' faces, having fun, smiling, chasing the dog in the sunset. And if I would have just kept cranking on that four-wheeler, I probably would have burned through the last little bit of my fumes while it was flooded, and it wouldn't have started. I would have had to walk home or push it home. So I feel like today, in our society, with this hustle culture just constantly going, if anything ever goes bad, the solution's always just try harder, work harder, put more into it. But I found in my life, most of the time the solution is just to stop, just to let go. Give it to God and enjoy the ride, enjoy the environment that you find yourself in. Because whenever you stop and you're in the moment, you get rid of that fear, you get rid of that panic, you realize it's not so bad. You realize that God's got you exactly where He wants you. When it's time for your four-wheeler to start back up, by the grace of God, it'll start up and nothing can stop it if it's in His will. So I just wanted to share this little story. It's a story that I have in my archive of adventures. And I wanted to get on YouTube before I forget about it. Take the lessons that I could from it. So I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Hope you enjoyed this little story time around a campfire. I love you guys. See you in the next one.